You are roughly the size of a dinner plate. Your entire body weighs less than a pound. You have no hands, no claws built for killing, no armored hide, no venom, and no speed that would impress anyone on this planet. And yet, right now, you are solving a problem that most animals never even recognize as a problem. You are planning for tomorrow. This is a crow's reality. Every single day. For most people, crows are just background noise. They are the blackbirds on telephone wires. The ones picking through a parking lot. The ones that seem to watch you a little too long before flying away. But what most people have never stopped to consider is what is actually happening inside that small, dark feathered head. Because the answer is something that still surprises the scientists who study it full time. Crows are members of a family called Corvidae, the corvids. That group includes ravens, jays, magpies, and jackdaws. But crows sit at the center of it. They are distributed across almost every continent on Earth, and they have been living alongside human civilization for thousands of years. Not because they wandered into our world by accident. Because they chose to. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Your brain, relative to your body size, is enormous. For a bird, it is almost unsettlingly large. In fact, if you scale brain size to body size the way neuroscientists do, using a measurement called the encephalization quotient, a crow score approaches that of chimpanzees and dolphins. That is not a loose comparison. That is what the data shows. So what does a brain like that actually get you? Your morning begins before sunrise. You have been roosting in a communal spot, possibly with hundreds of other crows, not because you are social in the way a herd animal is, but because you are gathering intelligence. Other crows who went to sleep knowing where food was will leave in the morning in a direction. You watch. You follow. This is information transfer happening without any language humans would recognize, but it is information transfer nonetheless. Ornithologist Marzluff, John Marzluff of the University of Washington, spent years studying exactly this behavior in urban crow populations and found that crows share knowledge socially in ways that directly parallel how humans spread information through communities. By the time the sun clears the horizon, you are already working. You land near a busy intersection. Not because you happen to be passing. You have been watching the traffic light cycle for days. You know, with something very close to certainty, that when the light turns red and cars stop, that is the moment you drop the hard walnut shell in front of the tire and wait. Then the light turns green. Then you wait again. Then you walk out, in the gap between moving cars, and collect the cracked nut. Scientists at Tohoku University in Japan documented wild crows doing exactly this, using traffic lights and human vehicles as tools. Not because anyone taught them. Because they observed a pattern, formed a hypothesis, tested it, and refined the behavior over time. In other words, they did science. You are not born knowing how to do this. That is the crucial part. Young crows spend 1 to 2 years in a kind of extended juvenility, still with their parents, still being fed, still watching. Ethologist Bernd Heinrich, who spent decades studying corvid cognition in the wild, described this extended learning period as one of the most striking features of corvid development. The brain needs time to wire itself for complexity. A crow that rushes into independence before it has fully observed the world around it will not survive as long as one that waited, watched, and built a model of how things work. Your memory is not like a mammal's memory. It is, in some ways, sharper. You can remember the face of a specific human who threatened you 3 years ago. Marzluff's lab demonstrated this directly. Researchers wearing specific masks handled and banded wild crows, and those crows not only remembered the threatening masks for years but passed that information to other crows who had never encountered those masks at all. A crow that had not been there, had not been touched, had not been threatened, would dive bomb and scold a stranger wearing a mask it had only heard about. Culturally transmitted threat memory. In a bird. This is not instinct. Instinct does not work that way. Instinct is fixed. What crows do is fluid. So let's reconstruct what a typical afternoon looks like for a wild crow in a temperate city or woodland edge. You have already eaten. You are not hungry. And here is where things get strange, because a full crow does not rest. A full crow works. You pick up a piece of food, something you do not need right now, and you carry it somewhere. You look around. You check whether any other crow is watching. If one is, you move. You find a new spot. You bury it under a leaf, or tuck it under bark, or press it into the grass. Then you walk away. Then you come back and check if anyone followed you. If they did, You dig it up and hide it somewhere else. You are not doing this randomly. You are tracking multiple hiding spots, cross-referencing them against what you know about your local competitors, and actively managing a distributed food cache that you will remember the location of, sometimes for months. Nicola Clayton of Cambridge University, one of the world's foremost experts on corvid cognition, ran a series of landmark experiments with a corvid called the western scrub jay, a close relative of crows, that revealed something no one expected. The birds not only remembered where food was hidden, they remembered what kind of food it was, and how long ago they had hidden it. Why does that matter? Because some food spoil. The jays retrieved perishable food first and non-perishable food later, adjusting their behavior based on a mental timeline. Clayton called this episodic-like memory, the ability to recall a specific event in terms of what happened, where it happened, and when. Previously, scientists believed only humans had this capacity in anything close to this form. The crow living in your city has something very close to an autobiography. Your social world is also more complex than it appears from a distance. Crows form long-term pair bonds, usually for life. They recognize individuals within their own species and track social hierarchies with precision. They play. Adult crows have been filmed sliding repeatedly down snow-covered rooftops, not foraging, not displaying, not communicating anything, just sliding. Returning to the top. Sliding again. There is no clean adaptive explanation for this behavior. It looks like fun, because it probably is. They also mourn. When a crow dies, nearby crows gather. They are quiet. They do not immediately flee. They sometimes bring objects. Kaeli Swift, a corvid researcher at the University of Washington, studied this behavior directly and found that crow gatherings around dead individuals were not random. The living crows were, in her interpretation, attempting to gather information, learning something about what killed the individual so they could avoid the same fate. But the behavior looks, unmistakably, like grief. Whether it is grief in the way you experience grief, nobody can say with certainty. What is certain is that a crow does not simply fly away from its dead. None of this makes a crow warm and cuddly. They steal. They deceive other crows. They have been documented mobbing not just predators but rival individuals, sometimes persistently and apparently vindictively. They are opportunists in the sharpest sense of the word. They will eat almost anything, including things that most other animals would refuse. This adaptability, dietary, behavioral, cognitive, is why they have outlasted so many other species. While specialists die when their niche disappears, crows bend. They shift. They find a new angle. There is something in that worth sitting with. You came into existence roughly the size of a golf ball, blind and helpless, in a nest your parents spent weeks constructing from sticks, mud, and whatever soft material they could locate. You were fed by both parents for weeks. You watched. You learned. You eventually left, spent a year or two in the company of adults who were not quite your parents, absorbing patterns, consequences, and strategies. Then you built a life. You remembered faces. You planned for winters you had not yet seen. You recognized the ones who threatened you and the ones who left food out. You solved problems that required you to imagine a future state of the world, to think forward in time. You did all of this with a brain the weight of a few grapes, in a body built for flight, in a world that has changed faster in the last 100 years than in the 100,000 before it. And you adapted. Just like you always have. Next time you hear a crow calling from a telephone wire, and you glance up for a second before looking away, consider the possibility that it has already been watching you for longer than you know, and that it will remember.